Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, we had a kind of somewhat dramatic week
You think?
this week. We started off the week in an optimistic frame of mind because it seemed as if Presidents Trump and Putin had had a cordial, lengthy telephone conversation last Thursday, in which they agreed upon a peace summit to be held in Budapest. Budapest, the home of the champion of peace, Viktor Orban. And so it seemed as if we were moving in a positive direction. And um, and then suddenly there was a reversal, an inexplicable reversal, one should say, because while Trump had said it seemed like Trump had said we're going to meet in Budapest, and the Russians confirmed, but they seemed more tentative about Budapest. But then things changed. So it's the change started on Monday when the two foreign ministers, Marco Rubio and Sergei Lavrov, had an obviously quite frosty conversation because the readouts from both the State Department and from the Russian Foreign Affairs Ministry were very terse. I mean, really just simply said, yeah, constructive conversation. I mean, that's about as
Definitely there was
minimum as you can say.
a tiff.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and then Trump kind of announced that, well, he doesn't think that he wants to go there. And then he really confirmed this during his meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. And of course, we can see a pattern in these events because, of course, we had the phone conversation on Thursday, the announcement of the summit, the usual gang, the Europeans, the NATO went into action, and lo and behold, Mark Rutte made an unscheduled visit to Washington, and then suddenly Trump decides, look,
It was pointed out to me, and when I look back at it, Mark Rutter, um, Fruity Rudy, he has a learning capacity. If you look at the White House released, he almost doesn't say a word.
no,
He just let him talk. Just let the
that's it.
president talk. You
That's it.
just sit there and
And
smile and nod
that's
your
right.
head.
And
That's a
he
that's a
nods, and
strategy. That's a strategy.
it's a strategy. And he also agrees with Trump's most ridiculous claims, such as he's ended 8 wars. And Roth actually pipes it, yes, 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 that you did that. So he agrees with it.
Exactly.
It's a totally nonsensical claim. But Rutte, who obviously knows it's nonsense, yeah, nonetheless, yep, yeah, you're absolutely right. You ended 8 wars. Um,
George, I have a question as we continue. Is our problem wanting so much for this conflict to end that we amplify what we think is moving in that direction? An associate question. Are I think it's already been established now, given what you just said, is that the Russians keep hoping that the administration will at least give credence. They don't have to agree with it, but give credence to the Russian perception of what is going on here. I think they're
Well,
kind of
I,
related.
I think that's that's absolutely right because Lavrov had said, and and maybe we can actually even look at that Lavrov had held a news conference after the phone conversation with Marco Rubio, and in this news conference, he kind of suggested that he was under the impression that there had been reached in Alaska an understanding
Yeah.
um, forged with between Trump and Putin. So the understanding, and remember what happened in Anchorage, which was that the Trump had still up until then Trump had still gone about the ceasefire. You know, we need to have a ceasefire, and then after Alaska, he said, "Yeah, you know, there's no point in having a short-term solution. We need a long-term solution." So it seemed then that somehow the Russians had been able to persuade Trump that there's no point in any of these interim stopgap measures. We need a long-term solution, which means an attempt to address the root causes of the conflict. And this was Lavrov who gave a news conference after he had met with you know, after he had met the Ethiopian foreign minister. So that was the remarkable thing. He meets the Ethiopian foreign minister, and after that, he really explained that, well, we had an understanding in Anchorage, and this is the there, here it is. And you can see here, this is the readout that this is with the understandings reached between the Putin in Alaska during their telephone contacts. And then again, he says, you know, this is the broad understanding. He repeats again, we reached understandings in Anchorage. And then, yeah, let's go back. And then again, today I was surprised to report, to read that somehow that basically the meeting is now indefinitely postponed, and said, you know, why? Our position has not changed. And that's really what's coming from the Russians, is that they somehow had assumed that that the Americans had understood their position. And
Well, the way I read it is that um, Trump wanted to have a summit with Putin after the conversation he had right before the Zelensky visit.
Mhm.
And my feeling is that when Rubio and Lavrov got on the phone, Rubio said, "Okay, now that we've agreed to have a summit in Budapest, we should implement a ceasefire.
Yep,
Now that we're meeting."
yep,
And I think it said, "No, but that's not."
yep,
I thought we explained to you in
yep.
Anchorage our position. I think that's a very plausible thing. Is that
I,
Rubio said, "Look, we're going to meet. Let's implement a ceasefire."
I think that's absolutely a very plausible argument, because more and more it's coming to seem that Rubio is a true poison within the administration, just as we had always expected.
But we've underestimated his level of involvement. Now it's coming into light.
Exactly. The Venezuela thing, I think that's you know, very much a Rubio's baby. But then you see him now in Gaza. He's in Israel, and you know, he makes a declaration. Oh, Hamas is in violation of the ceasefire. Well, in what way is it in violation? Well, it's supposed to disarm. Well, there's supposed to be a peace process. Disarmament is a part of the peace process. It's not a condition of the next step of the process. But you can see how Rubio is deliberately misinterpreting things in order for the desired result. And that's why I think what you're saying is entirely plausible, which is, well, they had a conversation with Lavrov, and then he said, yeah, well, now that we have the agreement, hey, how about a ceasefire? And then so that Trump can then say, oh, well, we now have a ceasefire.
Yeah.
Another glorious accomplishment.
Exactly. See, everybody, George put some meat on the bones of my supposition here, but it's all about a win. It's
Yep.
not about a
Yep.
ceasefire. It's not about ending a
Right.
war.
Right.
It's a win. Trump could have said, "Look, in 1 month, I've solved another war,
That's right.
which of course it isn't. Before we move on, I think it's important to note, George already touched on it, is that Marco Rubio in the last couple of months is actually, I think being National Security Advisor and Secretary of State, he is beginning to monopolize the Trump foreign
He is
policy. Okay.
very, very surreptitiously because he'd been having a low profile,
Yes.
but now
In the
he's
middle of the couch, remember? In the middle of the
that's right.
couch.
Now he's becoming his poison, and so that's why. And because this news conference by Lavrov, this came the day after the phone conversation with Rubio. And that's why he emphasizes here, this is several times. He goes back, I think 4 times during this news conference, he said the understandings we had reached in Anchorage. And then you think, well, what was the understanding? I mean, the only understanding that I can see is that a ceasefire is just pointless. I mean, there's no point. You're just postponing the war for a couple of years. I mean, there's no point in doing that. And Lavrov is saying, I thought you understood this. I thought you understood our position. And here again, he emphasizes, I would like to officially confirm that Russia has not changed its position compared to the understandings reached during the lengthy negotiations between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump in Alaska. And I think that he obviously, this is the day after the meeting with Rubio, I think he's rather pissed off
Yeah.
that Rubio just simply he came. I think probably during that phone call to say, yeah, okay, well, how about a ceasefire in anticipation of this meeting in Budapest? And I think that's why this phone conversation was really very, very frosty.
Well,
And
and I up until this latest shift, and there've been so many of them, um, I think that it was fair to pass it off as Trump, he's wily, his attention span is limited, he's, criticizing both sides, both individual leaders. We could pass this off
yep,
as the way Trump kind of deals with things,
yep.
okay? I don't know if there's a term for it. Maybe eventually there will be one, but this is a turning point. This is a shift that I don't think is um, everybody, the sanctioning of Lukoil and Rosneft, two of the largest energy concerns in Russia. These are the first sanctions on Russia from the Trump administration.
Right. Though they've continued the Biden sanctions, but these are
But
the
this
first
is
ones that
unique.
they have themselves imposed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So th this is very, very significant. Trump denies the U.S. is providing intelligence
Well, this
to
is
the.
very interesting. Let's
I'm
hold
sorry,
on
go
to
ahead.
that.
I'm sorry, go
Let's
ahead.
hold up. Well, so first, let's take a look at what he said when he talked with Rutte at the Oval Office. So here's the.
That'll be a big one. We canceled the meeting with President Putin. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get, so I canceled it. But we'll.
So he just says it. Oh, I canceled it because it didn't feel right. Um, why? I mean, without any real explanation. This is he's speaking here. This is on Wednesday. So in other words, 6 days had elapsed. Nothing happened during these 6 days for you to change your mind. I mean, change your position. Oh, well, it just didn't feel right. And now Trump, of course, wants to pretend, oh, well, it's not really very important, well, I can always change my mind tomorrow, and then, and then we'll everything. But I think, as you said, this is a turning point.
Yeah.
Because anyway, let's continue listening to him.
Do it in the future, but next week we'll be with many of you in those locations that I told you. Then it's back to Washington. So thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, can you tell us a little bit about why you're elevating sanctions?
Not a happy camper.
No.
I just felt it was time. Waited a long time. I thought that we'd go long before the Middle East. And Mark, as you know, we did the Middle East +7. So we did 7 different wars
Yep.
from Pakistan and India to so many.
Azerbaijan, Armenia.
Azerbaijan, Armenia.
Which said was impossible to do. All these
He's enumerating it for him.
one that we have left. We have 1 left. It'll be 9. We have 1 left, and I think we'll get that done too. I think we're on our way. Please.
Mr. President, do you have a timeline for when you think the story is going to be over because of your leadership?
You can't have in war. It's hard to have a timeline. Yeah, so many things happen in war. Go ahead.
What about tomahawks? It's definitely
Well,
very-
the problem with the tomahawk that a lot of people don't know, it'll take a minimum of 6 months, usually a year, to learn how to use them. They're highly complex. So the only way a tomahawk is going to be shot is if we shot it, and we're not going to do that. But there is a tremendous learning curve with a tomahawk. It's a very powerful weapon, very accurate weapon, and maybe that's what makes it so complex. But it will take a year. It takes a year of intense training to learn how to use it. And we know how to use it, and we're not going to be teaching other people. It'll be
The Tomahawks have a different. He wants to use the Tomahawks for something else. That's what they're
Right, I think so.
And on top of it, everyone, I think it would be a very. Do you know who makes the Tomahawk? I don't know what firm it does.
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the Russians can shoot them down. Okay, and that's not a very good selling point because, as far as I know, a tomahawk has never been shot down in anger.
Okay.
This would happen very, very quickly in Ukraine. Okay, not that one couldn't get through. I'm not saying that, but it's a wonder weapon. It's bandied about. We've been over this ground many, many times.
Right.
I don't think Trump wants to use them, and I don't think he wants to have his administration.
Well,
humiliated
this is what's
shot down.
interesting is that he thinks that he can escalate, but then he can somehow limit the escalation. He thinks he can just sort of, he's a juggler. He can just do these kinds of things. And so there was this article in the Wall Street Journal, which Trump didn't really like, but didn't really do anything to refute. And here it says the U.S. lifts key restrictions on Ukraine's use of European long-range missiles. And then and now Trump really didn't like the story. He said, the Wall Street Journal and the USA's approval of Ukraine being allowed to use long-range missiles deep in Russia is fake news. Okay, why is it fake news? The US has nothing to do with those missiles. I don't know what that means. Wherever they may come from or what Ukraine does with them. But now we know that Ukraine cannot use these missiles without US satellite targeting data and US guidance, satellite guidance. I mean, you have to evade all of the Russian air defense systems. Only the US can do that. So to say, oh, well, we don't have anything to do with that, and it's obviously untrue. And even those storm shadows, and Ukraine used one of those storm shadows, Ukraine cannot use those storm shadows without the United States assistance. I mean, that's it. I mean, they basically, the British and the Americans have an agreement on the storm shadows. You remember when Keir Starmer came to Biden and asked to use the storm shadows, Biden said no. And so nonetheless, now they've used them, and they cannot use them without American input. And here's the Wall Street Journal story.
Well, I mean, what is it, George? I mean, maybe he just simply doesn't know, or someone has told him that's not true, but it is true.
That's right. It's always very hard to know.
Yeah.
How much he knows and how much is being kept from him and how much he deliberately doesn't want to know.
Yeah, because 1.5 million Russians have been killed, and he's solved the Middle East crisis that has been going on for 3,000 years. We could go on and on and on.
Yes. But here you see, it says here, Ukraine used a British supplied Storm Shadow cruise missiles on Tuesday to strike a Russian plant in Bryansk. And then, but he's saying here that the Trump administration has lifted a key restriction on Ukraine's use of some long-range missiles. And then here we have the unannounced U.S. move to enable Kiev to use the missile in Russia comes after authority for supporting such attacks was recently transferred from Hegseth to the top U.S. general in Europe. So they can, okay, he's basically, that means you are involved. The top U.S. general in Europe, you are actively involved in this war.
Yeah, and he's the general that runs NATO.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So I think it's fair to assume that this Alexis has his own agenda.
That's
Okay.
right. Yep.
Yeah, when the decision-making process leaves the White House, goes to the Pentagon passes the baton to America's general in Europe. I mean, you get a little bit of distance there, don't you?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So you can say it's fake news and nothing to do with me.
Yeah,
And
Donald Trump, it may have nothing to
that's right.
do with you. We should be worried.
That's right. Exactly. Um, and then, however, U.S. officials said they expect Ukraine to conduct more cross-border attacks using the Storm Shadow, which is launched from Ukrainian aircraft and can travel more than 180 miles. The U.S. can restrict Ukraine's use of Storm Shadows because the missiles use American targeting data. They can restrict, you know,
They can. Very
they
conditional. Yes, they can.
and then in a statement, a White House official said, "This is a war that never would have happened had President Trump been president."
Well, you can't use that argument
Of course,
anymore. That's just we have to retire it,
yeah,
okay? Because Donald Trump is making decisions about how the conflict is being
yep,
continued.
that's right.
In Anchorage, and I'm not one of those that say it was a complete waste of time. George has already made reference to what Lavrov had to say. It was their chance to say, this is how we look at things. That's a positive, okay? And that's what makes Anchorage even more tragic now is that they know Russia's position.
Right,
And you're not going to be able to use a carrot like, oh, well, we'll sit in a palace in Budapest, as
right,
a reward. I mean,
right.
this is very typical of the Biden people, of the
Right.
foreign policy blob in
That's
general,
right. That's
okay?
right. That's right. Um, and the problem for Trump is that this argument of his, and during that presser with Mark Rutte, he repeated it again and again. Well, this war would never happen had I been president. Well, it's getting tired. It's getting lame because you have now been president. Soon it'll be 10 months that you've been president, and the war is still continuing. So, what would have, could have, should have happened had you been president is just no relevance. What have you done to bring it
Well,
to an
it's
end?
like saying if I had been president, the Civil War wouldn't have happened. I mean,
Right.
it's that relevant at this
It's
point.
exactly it's entirely a hypothetical, interesting intellectual discussion, but now irrelevant. This isn't an intellectual, it's not a seminar room where we can have these interesting conversations. You are president, and you're not actually doing anything to bring it to an end. He can say, "Oh, well, I'm doing all this, well, I'm doing this and this and this," but he's not doing anything. Swatting Zelensky one day and then swatting Russia the next day, that's not a policy. And then going back to swatting
Yeah,
Zelensky
let's
on the third day. I mean, that's not getting anywhere.
let's see but it does have an impact because why don't we go back to boxes, George? It's having a real impact is because now from the Russian side, what should they accept from what President Trump has to say? I mean, is it an even day or an odd day?
Hmm. Right,
Okay. That's
right,
one that's one impact. The other impact, which is it's more pernicious, is that the Europeans now, the coalition of the willing, they feel that they have a free hand now. Okay.
right.
So, Trump's policy, which George and I essentially agreed with, is marginalizing the Europeans, which because they're pro-war, they don't want to end this conflict. Trump is now empowering them.
Well, that's exactly it. And of course, when Zelensky was in Brussels on Thursday, he was treated as a conquering hero. Everyone was posing for photographs with him. Everyone, this is fantastic because now the Europeans have the wind in their sails. They'd been very nervous about which way Trump's going to go. And now, that's it. Trump has now made this commitment. And so now they think, well, now that he has made this commitment, let's go ahead and make our own commitment.
And
So
well, the wind in their sail, meaning they have momentum now.
they have the momentum because now Trump has embraced their policy. So really, keep it in mind.
Exactly. Exactly.
Trump's policy up until now has been he's been skeptical about sanctions because his position has been, I'm not at all sure sanctions are going to work, and they're unlikely to work with the Russians, and so that had been his stance. Now he's abandoned it, and without an explanation. When he was asked, why have you imposed these sanctions? He just said, well, I thought the time was right. Why do you think the time
Well,
is right?
if a real journalist, George and I was always commented that when NATO have its little confabs, there's never a contrarian journalist in the room, okay? But if I had a question, allowed to ask a question of Trump, I'd say, so you're embracing the Trump approach, the Biden approach
That's right.
to it. I
That's
wonder what his answer would be.
that's right. But it's interesting what you said there because somehow somebody snuck in into that presser in the Oval Office and asked Rutte a quite pointed question. I've never heard anyone asking such pointed questions for a NATO Secretary General. There's this guy called Liam Cosgrove. I'm not sure who he is.
That name rings a
It
bell.
does. It rings a bell with me too, but I'm not sure exactly who he was. But let's see if I can find this. Um, let's see.
Lobbying the U.S. government to continue its involvement.
Okay, let me hold it. Just go back a little bit.
Part of a ceasefire. He said that's a good compromise. So, President, do you think she plays an important role in terms of inserting?
Because but I wanted.
He can have a big influence on a big.
Cause for concerning. Question is actually for the Secretary General.
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, I don't know if you've seen this, but polling out of Ukraine shows a massive collapse in Ukrainian support for the war. Gallup poll had just 23%. That's less than a quarter. Zelensky came out today praising President Trump's proposal for freezing the front lines of battle as part of a ceasefire. He said that's a good compromise. So people view your coming here as, you're lobbying the U.S. government to continue its involvement in the war. You're obviously lobbying for more NATO weapons to be sent to Ukraine, but Ukrainians themselves don't want to fight the war. So how do you justify that morally?
Well, I'm lobbying only for one thing, and that is to make sure that we end this war. And I don't have to lobby the president because we totally agree on this, and this is what he has been doing.
Well, what a snake! What a snake!
Smarmy, oozing
Yeah,
with
really.
Dialoguing also with Zelensky.
Yes, he's part of the reptile tradition.
And the fact that the US is now supplying weapons into Ukraine, paid for by allies, is extremely important. And that's now happening since 2-3 months.
That's
about 2 billion moving into Ukraine.
Wind down. Why do you think that'll wind it down now?
What do you mean?
You think more weapons will wind down the war?
No, I mean, there's more to be done. So what you need, what the president said this weekend, stop where you are. So basically do a ceasefire and then have all your discussions about territory and whatever. But first stop the war. This is what you said on Friday and on Sunday.
It's a war. I mean, your question's really a fair one. It's a war that should have done.
Now, notice what Trump has done here, because Trump, I think, realizes that the peril from that question, because essentially he's, calling into question his own policy, because he's actually using Trump's own arguments against him. And so Trump realizes that the peril. I mean, normally he can just swat away. Oh, you're working for Putin, all this nonsense. But this is he sees danger. But Trump has no ability to answer this. And just listen to how weakly he answers this.
He's given up, George.
Sorry?
He's given up.
Yeah.
I feel it. It's a war that should have never started. And we're not selling any weapons to Ukraine. We're selling them.
Okay.
Yeah, here we go. Exactly.
Boilerplate.
Exactly, boilerplate. So, this war would never, and all this stuff. That's not an answer to his question, because, of course, by citing this poll of what Ukrainians think, and I mean, he didn't mention it, but you could go to the next stage, which is Zelensky is basically a dictator of Ukraine. He's not in any way accountable to the Ukrainians. I mean, he's basically canceled elections. I mean, the Ukrainians have no say in who leads them. So you're giving all this to this a person who basically is no longer in any way a representative of the Ukrainian people. And the Ukrainian people have expressed themselves in this poll. They don't want this war to go on. They want an immediate end to this war.
Over the last few weeks, Ukraine's ability to generate energy has been dramatically reduced. And I can tell you, it's getting cold. And they've been warned. The Ukrainian media is saying this right now, is that, first of all, in Kiev, they're not going to turn on the heat until sometime in December. Really? In December?
Yeah.
In December?
Right.
It gets cold starting now.
Yeah.
Okay, now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go to the streets out. Ukraine's more south than where I am, but at the end of the day, it's winter is the same.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and it's getting cold.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. So now Trump has, as we said, embraced the policy of Kaja Kallas. Trump
Yep.
and Kaja Kallas are now one and the same.
Yep.
Trump may want to distance himself, and he may, for all we know, put in a call to Vladimir, his good friend Vladimir, later this afternoon, and see if we can come to some kind of an agreement. But, and this is significant, the Russians, I think, are now in no mood. What Trump did this time has kind
Yeah.
of pissed them off.
Well, I mean, as we've already mentioned, now we have unique sanctions against Russia from the Trump administration.
Okay.
We pointed out that there was a continuation from Biden, but now this is new. This is new.
Exactly.
And at a certain point, if you look at the chronicles of how Johnson made decisions about Vietnam, there's a certain point where you take a position and you can't reverse it. Okay, I mean, in the beginning, he struggled. He struggled very hard about escalating, and then at a certain point, you say, well, maybe we should, get to the peace table. And his advisors said, no, we're way past that point. You can't reverse now.
Right.
You can't. And
That-
Trump
that-
is
that-
he's
that-
allowing himself to be driven by others. I guess personally, it really, really angers me that Rutte gets his way with Trump because he knows that he's flattering him.
Yep.
He's looking to please Trump's vanity, and he's getting away with it, everyone.
Right.
And George is absolutely right. I think this is a breaking point. I mean, it's like, what's the point? Okay, I mean, we tried to keep the embers of Ankara alive, but you've just smothered them.
That's right. So here's let's look at the Russian response. So first out the gate was, as you might have expected, Medvedev.
Oh yes,
And he now posts mainly on Telegram. I think maybe he thinks that if it's in Russian, the Americans aren't going to pick up on it, but of course they are going to pick up on it just because. So here it says Trump canceled the Budapest summit, new sanctions against our country by the US. What else? Will there be new weapons besides the notorious tomahawks? And then, if any of the many commentators still had any illusions, here you go. The US is our adversary, and their talkative peacemaker has now fully embarked on the warpath against Russia. True, he doesn't always actively fight on the side of Bandera's Kiev, but this is his conflict now, not the senile Biden's. And then they'll say
he knows how to press the buttons, doesn't he?
yes, yes. They'll of course say he couldn't help himself, that he was pressuring Congress, etc. That doesn't change the main point. The decisions taken are an act of war against Russia. Now that's a serious charge, and I admit that Lavrov does shoot his mouth off. Nonetheless,
Medvedev.
sorry, yes, exactly, Medvedev. That Medvedev does shoot his mouth off. The decisions taken are an act of war against Russia, but he does talk a lot like that. But that still should be taken seriously. I mean, that's I mean, he is a former president. And now Trump has fully aligned himself with insane Europe. And then we had, but there's a clear upside to this latest swing of the Trump pendulum. It allows us to strike at all of Bandera's hiding places with a variety of weapons and without regard for unnecessary negotiations, and to achieve a victory precisely where it's possible, on the ground, not behind a desk, by destroying enemies, not by concluding meaningless deals. So, okay, that obviously that's
Well, that's everyone should know that this is we have official Russia, and then we have alter ego Russia.
alter, yes, yeah.
This is the alter ego.
That's his position, is to kind of shooting his mouth off. But the comments from, well, first of all, let's look at Zaharova. She was also quite pointed. Here, where she says that about the original, we're going to stick to the original goals, neutral, non-aligned nuclear free status, demilitarization, denazification, and the development of reliable guarantees for the rights and freedoms of the Russian-speaking population. Like, Lavrov also said this the other day. I mean, I think, again, he probably mentioned it to Marco Rubio during their phone conversation. And and then she says about the sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, we view this step as entirely counterproductive, including in terms of signaling the need for a meaningful negotiated solution to the Ukrainian conflict. If the current US administration follows the example of its predecessors, who attempted to coerce or force Russia into compromising its national interests through unlawful sanctions, the result will be exactly the same: disastrous from a domestic political perspective and detrimental to global economic stability. And then Putin, it was his turn to speak. And now keep in mind, I mean, the Russian position on Trump has consistently been positive. They've never said anything negative about him.
Look, here's the quote unquote Gaza 20-point peace plan. They were
very exactly, very laudatory, laudatory. And even the provocations. I mean, Trump has kind of been insulting towards Putin. Putin never responded in kind. Remember, he said something like, "Oh, the bullshit that Putin throws at us," and so on. Really, but not at all a respectful way of talking about another president. Anyway, he was asked, obviously, about, "Hey, what do you think about this, the sanctions?" And then he says, obviously mentions there about the purchase of our toilets will cost them dearly. It seems that they would actually need them in the current situation if they continue the same policy towards the Russian Federation. So this is, Putin being, I mean, he has a heavy-handed sense of humor, but
yes, he can be edgy when he wants to be.
Right, but sure. It's okay, the toilets. He's got the okay. Regarding the statements made by the President of the United States, what can I say? In our last telephone conversation, both the meeting itself and its location were proposed by the American side. And I agreed with this, expressed my thoughts on the matter, and said that, of course, such meetings need to be well prepared. It would be a mistake for both me and the American president to approach this lightly and leave the meeting without the expected result. So that was, that's kind of
standard Russian position.
Yeah, standard Russian position. I think I'm sure they made that clear, to Trump that that's exactly what this has to be very well prepared. There has to be some kind of a document, which is some sort of a peace plan to be talked about, agreed upon, signed, whatever. But just simply a chit chat, for the cameras, there's no point in that. And then now regarding the new sanctions, first, there's nothing new here. Yes, they are serious for us, of course, that's clear, and they will have certain consequences, but they won't have significant impact on our economic well-being. It's well known that during his first presidential term, President Trump imposed the largest number of sanctions ever imposed against the Russian Federation. These sanctions currently have two aspects, purely political and an economic one. So it kind of brings up the sanctions from Trump's first term. And then he says, and this is, I think, significant, as for the political aspects, what are we talking about here? This is, of course, an attempt to put pressure on Russia. But no self-respecting country or people ever makes decisions under pressure. And of course, Russia has the privilege of feeling and considering itself among the list of self-respecting countries and peoples. And that's the first thing. So that's really the point. He's saying, well, what the hell do you think? Are we really going to succumb because you've slapped on new sanctions? You know, whatever the hardship that may cause, we're not going to change our policy as a result. I mean, you should know that. I mean, you're the president of the United States. You should know that that isn't going to change our policy. And that's what I mean is that Trump has sort of embraced the sort of the Kaja Kallas, Ursula von der Leyen moronic view of the world that somehow Russia's going to do this and Putin's going to do that, and then come to the negotiating table. We're going to put this pressure on whatever. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? And now Trump has embraced this idiotic view, a view that he himself had said in the past is idiotic.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to the role that Rubio is playing, is that it seems to me that he tried to impress upon Trump that I did my best. I mean, I said we can get this meeting done. Like that's a doable thing, but we need a ceasefire.
Right.
And I'm sure that Lavrov was just like, what have we been talking about for months now?
Right.
Okay, and you're right. Trump is just in reversed, and I think now he's now in a very difficult reversible position. He can't.
He's in very difficult because now he's imposed these sanctions. He'd been saying, that yeah, I could do it, but it looked as if he was just sort of postponing it indefinitely. Yeah, I'm going to think about it, and then so on. But he's the one who announced that he's canceling the Budapest summit, and then he's the one who then imposed the sanctions. Now, Trump is, of course, trying to evade responsibility because when he sent out the truth announcing the sanctions, he did it on the kind of Treasury Department logo, as if somehow this is the Treasury Department that did it. Wow. First I heard of it, the Treasury Department.
Yeah, it's all Besset. Yeah, right. Okay.
It's exactly. And
he's a war hawk. Wow.
He's a war hawk. He is a war hawk, and he's been advocating sanctions really from the beginning. And then he says, and remember, he's a Sorosite. His background is Soros. That's why he made his fortune and his reputation working for Soros. And then he says, but if we're talking about the political aspects, then of course this is an unfriendly act towards Russia. That's also quite a serious thing. I mean, it's not an act of war. He says it's an unfriendly act towards Russia. So he's basically Trump has performed an unfriendly act towards Russia, and it doesn't strengthen Russian-American relations, which are only just beginning to recover. Of course, with such actions, the U.S. administration is damaging Russian-American relations. And then he talks a little bit about the economic aspect. So then he talks about, so sharp increase right now doesn't seem possible. And if the supply of our oil and petroleum products on the global market were to sharply decrease, prices would rise.
Prices would rise.
Gee, I mean, that's pretty,
wow.
Pretty radical
I wish I had a
V8 there.
Remember this one? I wish I had a V8.
Wow. I wish I'd done a course at the Harvard Business School, to figure that one out. So with the sharper prices would rise, as my American colleague and I discussed, what would this lead to? It would lead to a sharp increase in the cost of oil and petroleum products, including the gas stations. And the United States is no exception. And given the domestic political calendar in the United States, it's clear how sensitive some processes will be in this regard. And those who are pushing the current administration to make such a decision, we need to understand who they're working for.
It's just that paragraph there. It's so emblematic of how well the Russians understand American politics and policies. And when any American administration talks about Russia, they fumble around. They have no
Right.
clarity. It's
No.
not founded in based in facts. But this shows we understand how it works. It happens over and
Right.
over and over again.
But I think they figure, and I think quite reasonably, that this is going to have very negative consequences for Trump. Because if indeed, I think it's likely, this is going to cause a spike in prices at the gas pump, then Trump is going to get hit. Trump will get blamed for this. It's, as sure as night follows day, Trump will get blamed for it. And if it has even worse consequences, like it leads to a recession, which is also quite possible, then Trump will get blamed for that. And that's why his, his Marco Rubio is kind of rubbing his hands, thinking that I played my hand quite shrewdly here. I took over the foreign policy. I transformed a kind of the Trumpian foreign policy into a kind of an orthodox neocon foreign policy, and then he can walk away. Probably after the mid.
Well, no, what he'll say is, oh, I mean, obviously everyone when we mention little Marco, remember the 2028 campaign.
Yeah.
And so, he'll say, yeah, Trump, he was just floundering all over. But I was trying to control the ship of state, but I was thwarted on this, on that. He's a great guy, tells
Right.
good jokes, and we'll forever remember him for the ballroom at the White House.
Right.
But I did my best. I did the best I could.
Right,
And
right. Yeah, definitely is going to do that, but he's also will be, the hawk. I mean, he is clearly putting forward this hawkish view, and he'll say, yeah, well, we tried to be nice, we tried the Trumpian approach, and so on, but that didn't work, because we were dealing with Putin. That's you can't be nice to Putin. You gotta peace through strength. Trump himself said peace through strength. The only way we can deal with Putin is by threatening him. We need to use pressure against Putin.
I try not to toot our own horn here, but we warned everybody about that. We warned everyone.
Right.
You put Rubio in there, and George and I are going to talk at great length in the weeks and months ahead about the machinations when it comes to Venezuela and the entire
Right.
Western Hemisphere. This is not Trump. This is Rubio.
Right. It absolutely is. And I think watch the Middle East. Watch how he's now going to undermine and destroy that the deal.
Of course, of course. Someone like Marco Rubio is going to say, and this is going to be an attack on J.D. Vance. What successes are you talking about?
Right. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. That's right. And then he's asked about with the long range weapon. Regarding use of Western long range weapons, how do you personally assess the apparently contradictory signals coming from Washington? The day before, the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal reported that the US had lifted a key restriction on the use of these weapons. Then Trump stated that Tomahawks would not be supplied after all. And just an hour ago, Zelensky again said that Ukraine would receive weapons with a range of almost 3,000 kilometers. In your opinion, is this still an escalation? And Putin said, this is an attempt at escalation, but if such weapons are used to strike Russian territory, the response will be very serious, if not overwhelming. Let them think about it. Now,
George is absolutely right that this is a very different tone.
This is a very different tone. And why I think this is very significant, because I think the Russians have for some time put a lot of faith in Trump. I mean, I think this has been going on for some time. I thought that somehow if there was a change in power in the United States, Trump, who made all sorts of noises about negotiating something and generally very sympathetic views towards Russia. He did say NATO expansion was a really bad idea. You can see why the Russians didn't like it and so on. So I think they had hopes on Trump. Once they realize there's nothing to be hoped for from Trump, I think that's going to lead to a very different attitude. And I think they're going to just decide we need to wrap this up. We need to get
Yeah,
very serious about this now.
that's why I mentioned LBJ, is that at a certain point, a shift you make, you own it. You can't reverse. Trump, I think, up until this shift after the quote unquote failed Zelensky meeting,
Right.
he has turned a decisive corner, and I don't see him unless it's extraordinary circumstances. I don't see him being able to shift. He was going between these different poles.
He was going with that's
Now he's decided, and he might not be able to undecide now.
it's going to be very difficult to undecide now because okay, I can well believe next week he said, "Oh, I'm going to have another phone conversation with Vladimir," and and maybe they'll have it. I'm sure they'll have a phone conversation, but he's not going to be able to do "Oh, let's have another meeting," because the Russians say, "Well, and talk about what?" I mean, that's the Russians say that there's no point unless you've got something specific to discuss, and Trump won't have. He
George,
won't have.
question before I forget. The coalition of the willing.
Yeah, I want to talk. Yeah, okay.
The 12-point program.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to go with that? You want to go there?
Okay, all right. Well, that's right. So we had where we're meeting where we have the coalition of the willing is meeting today in Downing Street. So that was the whole gang is there, and we have the all the usual crowd. Let me just pull this up. We have the press.
It's a big club and you ain't in it.
That's right. Exactly. It's a big club and you ain't. But interestingly enough, not that many of them are actually physically going to be showing up at the
It's like the coalition of the willing carousel.
Well, it's
people jump on when they want.
Yeah,
Okay?
but the thing is that it's Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Now, people have got things to.
The French take their weekend seriously.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're not going to do that. They're not going to just come along and say, "Oh, you have to show up on Friday afternoon," and so let me.
Yeah, my daughter's equestrian matches late in the day. I really can't miss that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's but that was the let me just because you were asking about the 12 point the 12-point plan. Yeah.
What my question was going to be, and we'll go through the details of it. It seems to me, from what we know at this moment, that Trump will embrace whatever 12-point program that the Europeans come up with.
Right. That's right. So this is because this is very, very interesting, and because precisely because what happened after the announcement of the Budapest summit, the brains trust of the coalition of the willing said, we need to get Trump on board. This is he's going to go and talk with Putin, with Viktor Orban standing by his side. This is becoming a disaster. This is the last thing we want. So they said, hey, why don't we come up with a variant on the 20-point Gaza plan? Hey, what a wizard idea. Let's call it.
Trump could be the chairman of the board.
Chairman of the board.
They said it.
He said it, the chairman of the board. And they came up with, hey, let's have a Trump 12-point Ukraine plan. And let me just and so they had this idea that this is what they were going to do, and let me
and of course Zelensky was Zelensky at this meeting? I think yes. I mean, so it's going to be an endorse. Yes, this is good. This is going to be the coalition of the willing plus Ukraine plan, and we're going to call it the Trump plan.
That's right. Exactly. And so here was the Telegraph story. Donald Trump no longer plans to meet Vladimir Putin in Hungary. And then so they again announced they would hold us then. And then it goes on. Ukraine and its European allies
Here we go.
will discuss a 12-point peace plan. The Telegraph understands sources said that the proposal is modeled on Mr. Trump's peace deal for Gaza. What a surprise. You know that that was they know how to work Trump. Hey, well, you've got this 20-point plan with Gaza. It was a fantastic success. How about let's call this the Trump Ukraine plan. Jonathan Powell, one of these awful people, Britain's national security advisors, has been credited with the idea of playing on the Americans' ego.
It's all out there, transparent, everyone.
That's right. I mean, imagine he came up with an idea. Wow, somebody had to come up with this idea. Why don't we play on Trump's ego? Wow, you really have to have a brilliant mind to come up with that project. And then says the plan for Ukraine involves points such as the return of children kidnapped by Russia, a pathway to European Union membership, and reconstruction of the war-ravaged country. Okay, that's
Okay. Well, there you go. There you go. There's the greatest hits, everybody. A fake story on kidnapped children.
That's
Fake.
right.
Okay.
That's right.
Pathway to European Union membership. What does this have to do with the conflict? I don't know. Reconstruction, that is a huge question. Well, what about security?
Well, that's it. But of course,
It didn't make the greatest hits, George.
no. But of course, by security, they mean, hey, security guarantees. And so, which is always what they're talking about, security guarantees. Absolutely. They basically, hey, we're going to essentially move NATO lock, stock, and barrel into Ukraine. I mean, when they talk about the unconditional ceasefire, even using that term, unconditional. I mean, yeah, it's unconditional. We'll have a ceasefire, and then we're going to use the moment the ceasefire goes into effect, we're going to send all our NATO forces into Ukraine. Ukraine will just simply be the front line of NATO. And that is, it's unconditional. Oh, the Russians aren't accepting it. Who the hell would accept such a deal?
That wasn't a condition.
That's right. And then here, this is the Bloomberg. Europe and Ukraine prepare 12-point proposal to end Russia's war. End Russia's war. European nations are working with Ukraine on a 12-point proposal to end Russia's war along current battle lines, pushing back against Vladimir Putin's renewed demands to the US for Kiev to surrender territory in return for a peace deal. A peace board chaired by US President Donald Trump would oversee implementation of the proposed plan, according to people familiar with the matter. So they've got everything in place.
Again, George and I are really fastidious about language, okay? But let's just unpack just one of them. Vladimir Putin's renewed demands to the U.S. for Kiev to surrender.
Right.
No, not to surrender, to recognize that they no longer have control of that. It's not to surrender it. They don't have to. They surrender has nothing to do with this.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
They control these areas.
Yep. Right. That's right. And then once Russia follows Ukraine in agreeing to a ceasefire and both sides commit to halting territorial advances, the proposals envisage the return of all deported children to Ukraine. They bring that up as if this is such a huge issue, complete non-issue. It's a totally non-issue invented in the West, which the International Criminal Court just played along with. But it's a phony issue, but they put this front and center, and the exchanges of prisoners, which already are taking place. Ukraine would receive security guarantees. Oh, I see. Then of course, by which they of course they mean NATO. Funds to repair war damage, and a pathway to rapidly join the European Union. And then sanctions on Russia would gradually be lifted, though some $300 billion in frozen central bank reserves would only be returned once Moscow agrees to contribute towards Ukraine's post-war reconstruction. So this is just a variant on this plan of seizing Russia's frozen assets. And the idea, well, that's not really theft because the money will be returned to Russia once Russia agrees to pay Ukraine. I mean, the logic, the infantile logic is so ludicrous. It's like, oh, well, it's not really theft because we'll return it once they actually cough up money to Ukraine. But what's interesting is that the EU keeps saying all this and the media report this, but the EU or NATO or whatever, they've never gone to the International Court of Justice to get a legal opinion on this. They say, well, I think they found a legal way to come to this. Okay. How about getting an advisory opinion? That's what the World Court is there for, to get an advisory opinion. Is it legal to seize other countries' sovereign assets?
Everyone, one of the easiest wars to understand, at least in a pro forma sense, is the Second World War, because so many people refer to it. Even during the Second World War, belligerents did not have their bank assets confiscated.
No.
During the Second World War,
frozen, but never
frozen, but not confiscated.
Yeah.
And just a reference point, George. Is the EU at war officially with Russia?
No.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
I mean, you can. I mean, it's very much like, the Polish government saying, well, this blowing up of the pipeline was
Well, we're going to talk about
no.
that.
But what I'm just saying
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that there is not legal hostilities going on here now. I mean, if there were, then I would agree. Let's get an opinion on this. They don't even want that.
No, they because there is no way in the world that the World Court would rule in the Europe's, NATO's, whatever, in favor. There's just no way. I mean, there are so many international legal documents that declare sovereign immunity and that sovereign assets are absolutely prohibited under any circumstances to be
That's
used.
why countries put their money in these financial institutions,
Right.
Euroclear, because of what George just said, is that these are immutable. This is rock solid. This is
Right.
backed up by law, by
Right.
contracts. That's why countries do this.
That's why they do this. And so the idea that Ursula von der Leyen has sort of come up with some nonsensical justification, and that counts as some sort of a legal finding. The media report, well, the EU has found sort of a legal way of doing this. They haven't found a legal way of doing this, which is why they still haven't been able to do it. Because Belgium rightly is holding out and says, because Belgium is saying we're going to be on the hook for this. Because we're going to find ourselves liable for whatever, 200 billion euros.
You know what? We're talking litigation that could last decades.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so the Belgians rightly think, hey, we're the ones who are going to be on the hook. No one's going to come in and support us. This is why all the we'll support you, Belgium. Don't you worry. Yeah, right. You're absolutely come and support us.
Russia's not the only country, the only central bank that has money in these institutions. You steal it, you're going to see everyone else drain their funds away. Okay,
Exactly.
And they know it.
That's right. That's right. And then the Moscow and Kiev would enter into negotiations on the governance of occupied territories, though neither Europe nor Ukraine will legally recognize any occupied land as Russian, the people said. Now, and they said Ukraine's allies from the so-called coalition of the willing will convene on Friday. A summit of European Union leaders in Brussels on Thursday will discuss additional sanctions. They talked and talked and talked on Thursday, and nothing was decided on. Very, very disappointed. They came up with the 19th package of sanctions, and the good thing is that they're working already on number 20. So they're already, busy on figuring the next.
Well, it seems to be a fool's errand. If the 19th round didn't work, why do you think the 20th will?
Well, that's right. Well, but that's right, and that's the Kaja Kallas way of looking at it, which now
look, everyone, it's a moot point. There is no expectation here that these sanctions will ever be lifted. So life goes on. Life goes on. Look for different markets, different export, different import. If you want that Gucci bag from Rome, well, you'll get it through Kazakhstan. You'll pay a lot more money.
Right.
But there's just no expectation. This is like beating a dead horse.
That's right. But but ultimately, if they do go down this path, and it may be that they'll eventually they'll manage to get Belgium, they'll bully Belgium sufficiently to accept this agreement, and they will seize these assets. But as you say, then you are guaranteeing decades of litigation. That this is going to go on and on for decades. Very painful, very embarrassing, and other countries are going to draw their conclusions. Just as you said, they're going to say, "I'm going to park my money here." What if the U.S. EU policy changes towards my country next year? Suddenly they accuse us of genocide or whatever, or violating gay rights or anything at all, and suddenly they're going to seize our assets. I mean, at any moment, any country can be subjected to international sanctions. So why would anyone want to park their money in Europe?
They just don't think ahead, do they?
Right.
And it also it tells us something else, everyone. These frozen Russian assets. They want our word. They want to steal them, and they want to somehow, in one shape, one form or another, deliver help to Ukraine, either directly financially, helping them buy weapons and all of that. It shows that the Europeans don't have the financial heft to pursue the policy that they want. They can't afford this
Right.
conflict.
No, I
Okay,
think
so they need to steal somebody else's
I had
money
to
to
steal.
fund it.
That's right. Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's just not a punishment; it's necessity if they want to
Right. But you
continue.
see, what they want to do is, of course, to continue this war for another 3, 4 years. They figure that this money will keep it going for another 3 years. Which is that's all really they're thinking. That's their time frame. Well, let's keep it going for some years. And as we discussed before, I think they have eventual plans for
Yeah,
with Russia.
because as George and I talked about, I think it was last Friday, which I think is one of the best podcasts we've ever had, because I think it was really thinking outside the box. George is absolutely right. 300 billion, that, yeah, 100 billion a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
That gets us magically close to 2030.
That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly that.
So
That's
the theory of the case is Russia will be so weakened by then. This will be the time in which Europe will remilitarize, consolidate its military industrial complex, and then when Russia is weakened, then they will take the offensive.
that's it. That's
George and
that's
I
it.
talked about this a week
That's
ago.
right. That's the plan. I've no doubt at all that is the plan, because if you listen to these people, this is war talk. I mean, I think Viktor Orban pointed out. When I go to Brussels, all I hear is war talk. That they are planning on war. You listen to Ursula von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas, and the rest of them. They don't talk about anything else other than Ukraine. No, no, there are apparently no EU problems that need addressing. Nothing. Everything is hunky dory inside the EU. The only thing that they're obsessed with is Ukraine, which isn't even a member of the EU. So basically, they are planning this war with Russia. Um,
And
yeah,
and one of the lines in this 12-point proposal, which Trump will be the chairman of the board, is rapid accession of Ukraine into the EU. Oh, that's getting ahead of your
that
skis,
is it is it is.
way ahead of your
Yeah,
skis,
yeah.
because one of the most belligerent actors in all of this is Poland, and they don't want to see Ukraine in the EU anytime soon. Keep in mind. The exact term doesn't come to mind right now, but they have a development fund to develop industries and sectors. Poland is one of I think still number one recipient of getting these. If Ukraine comes in, Ukraine will get it.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no question. I don't.
And Ukraine is an agricultural country. So is Poland. There's no way they're going to let them in. So they're being very, very dishonest here.
Well, they are, but of course, what they mean is they're going to have some kind of a Mickey Mouse arrangement whereby, oh, you're in the waiting room of the EU. They obviously they have no interest in introducing Ukraine into the EU. All they want to do is to militarize Ukraine, militarize the EU. I mean, the EU is not just simply a military alliance; it's an adjunct of NATO. So that's all they're really interested in: getting Ukraine as the as essentially an armed battleship with guns pointed at Russia. So that's their only interest. They haven't got anyone else into the EU. I mean, all these countries in the Balkans, they've been waiting patiently for years and years, and there's no
Not to
prospect
speak
of any
of
of them getting.
Turkey,
Yeah,
not to speak of
yeah,
Turkey.
Turkey's.
But George brings up an interesting point that I don't think that is it's obvious, but it's not. Oh, it's very rarely picked up on. Is that before the special military operation, we did see, at least officially, a distinction between NATO and the European Union.
Right,
During the course of this conflict, we
right,
see a real fusion
right,
because the European Union very rarely talked about security because the security arm was NATO.
right, right,
Okay. So the EU worried about farm subsidies and things like this.
right,
Okay.
right.
Transportation, taxation, stuff like that.
Yeah,
That is a sea change
yeah,
that people don't haven't really picked up on
right.
because now we have a militarized, an authoritarian
Yeah,
EU as a
yeah.
result, and that is working in the direction that so many people wanted. They needed something
Yeah,
like this to get
that's right.
Europe to go down that path.
That's right. That's it. That's exactly what they're doing. And essentially, so the EU is just simply becomes this militarized bloc, and led by the Germans, the Poles, the French, and of course Britain is kind of it is big through this fusion with NATO. It's Britain
NATO.
is kind of boom front and center. So this coalition of the willing meeting takes place today. And here is the press release from Downing Street. And here, this coalition of the willing set to meet as leaders focus on crippling. Notice the use of the word crippling. Russia's ability to wage war to bolster security. Crippling Russia's ability to wage war.
That's
This is known
remedial.
as a
It's very remedial English, but
it's
it's also
remedial. It's I think it's known as misplaced modifier. I mean they're basically they because the way it sounds, Russia's ability to wage war to bolster security. Because yeah, well that's what so you're admitting Russia's war is about bolstering security. So I think what they mean is its leaders focus on crippling Russia's ability. I mean, leaders want to bolster security by crippling Russia's ability to wage war. But the way it reads is that Russia's waging war to bolster security. So I don't think that's kind of what they want to say. Yeah, this is known as you say, remedial English, and it's misplaced modifiers.
well, it seems to me that in the UK, English is a second language now
Yes, it
because
is. Yeah, yeah. That's it is. It's a second language. And then European leaders are set to arrive in London today for a critical meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, as Ukraine's allies ramp up pressure on Russia heading into winter. Um,
why the reference to winter?
yeah, I don't know.
Why? It happens every year at the end.
Yeah, I don't know what I mean. What the,
As the sun sets each day or something.
but also it's interesting they say ramp up pressure on Russia heading into winter. So are they suggesting that Russia isn't very good at handling winter? That
Or
somehow.
maybe Ukraine won't be handling winter
Well,
well.
maybe, but Ukraine's allies ramp up pressure on Russia heading into winter. But it's again unclear who's going to have problems this winter. Is it
Well,
Ukraine or
again,
Russia?
who wrote this? Okay. I mean, Why winter?
Well, that's right, but because that's why it would seem.
Is a winter a problem for whom?
For whom exactly? Because you normally think, well, Russians are pretty good with winter. They've had a lot of experience of winter, so I don't know whether cold weather particularly intimidates the Russians. Global leaders set to convene this afternoon, both in person in London and virtually. Oh, that's like, I prefer virtually so I can still be snacking. So Prime Minister will urge leaders to act to take Russian oil and gas off the global market, finish the job on Russian sovereign assets, to unlock billions of pounds to fund Ukraine's defenses, and step up the gifting of long-range capabilities. Gifting.
Gifting, that sounds so benign. George,
Exactly, gift.
I'd like to gift you with an H bomb.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Oh, gifting, which is suggests like little children around the
Yeah.
Christmas tree. We're gifting you. You're gonna little give. Look what Santa Claus brought you.
A cupcake for you.
That's
Okay.
right, gifting. And you're absolutely right. Whoever wrote this has absolutely no idea of how to use the English language. Um, Meeting comes as meeting comes. I mean,
Uh-huh.
there's a definite article missing there.
Well, I guess because there isn't a full stop at the end, they feel they have license here. Okay, because
Um,
it's not technically a sentence.
Well, yes, there is that, but you still have to. You can't. I mean, there are languages which don't have definite and indefinite articles, such as Russian, but English is very strict about articles.
Very strict.
Yeah. So meeting comes as the Prime Minister announces acceleration of missile delivery program to deliver 140 lightweight multi-role missiles to Ukraine this winter, supporting
It's winter. It's
That's
winter.
right. Supporting UK jobs.
Oh my God. Okay.
Thank God we've got jobs.
Okay. Not only is it remedial English, but is morally bankrupt
Yes.
and I mean, look, wow. And it's a jobs program. Okay.
Exactly the jobs. Biden, of course, went down that path of talking
Yeah.
about it's all about jobs. This is fantastic. It's a jobs program. Leaders will convene this afternoon, and they can to discuss how they can pile pressure on Putin. I'm going to pile lots and lots of pressure.
Do you pile pressure or you apply
You
pressure?
you can pile pressure, but it's very colloquial. I mean, you're right. You're right. Apply pressure is the more proper academic way of speaking, but you can, I'm gonna pile the pressure on him. But it's very colloquial. It's not really
Well, you're
appropriate
like
written English.
you ply someone with alcohol, right?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can apply someone. Yeah, yeah, but not you don't pile alcohol. But you can pile on. Yeah, let's pile on.
But see, that's different.
Right. No, I think so. But I think you can you can pile pressure, but as I say, I think it's just very colloquial. It's not written English. You
Yeah,
don't
maybe we should stop because we're going to be accused of being really nerdy right now. So keep going.
I do get a little nerdy when it comes to the English because people always assume that the English are very good with language.
I'll tell you, everyone,
Shakespeare, Dickens, they're masters
George's
of the English language.
George's book, Bombs for Peace, it's literature. It is beautifully written.
Thank
It
you.
is beautifully written. Every sentence counts, not all the verbiage, and it's just grammatically it's spotless.
Thank you.
Spotless.
Thank you. But very much not the way the English use their language, and continue to pile pressure on Putin as he continues to kill innocent civilians with indiscriminate attacks across Ukraine, including hitting a nursery filled with toddlers and children this week.
There's no evidence of that whatsoever.
No, that's right. It's very interesting. With every time Russia, it's always hitting kindergartens. I mean, apparently Russia had no interest in hitting anything else other than kindergartens.
Yeah, but then what about the people that were on the Crimean beach when they were attacked? Okay, by the Ukrainians.
That's right. The London hosted meeting comes after Putin proved yet again that he's not serious about ending his illegal war. failing to engage with President Trump's most recent proposals for meaningful peace talks. Hold it, hold it. Who canceled the summit? Because most recent proposal for meaningful peace talks, who canceled it? Trump said, I canceled it.
Well, I mean, I don't know who initiated it. There's different. I don't know if we can actually ever determine that, but it appears that Trump initiated the meeting, and he's the one that canceled it.
Mhm.
Okay, so
I agree.
again, there's a lot of okay. Is it dishonesty or is it just ideological laziness? I don't know. It's yeah. I
Well,
mean, for George and I, this is like I think when you think about it, George, this is like kind of a master class in unraveling
right,
a very pernicious ideology. Okay, I mean this is pure propaganda.
right. It is. It is.
There's we've always seen articles that want to sway you, they want to nudge you, okay? And usually what they do, they can be very clever with facts. They don't even use facts now.
No, that's right. You see, what they've done, why the propaganda, and this is something we've addressed many times before, is that everybody knows that peace talks have nothing to do with ceasefire. Peace talks can continue while a war goes on. It's not predicated on having a ceasefire, and they know this perfectly well. The Vietnam peace talks went on for years, and years and
Well,
years.
you can even say the Trump Gaza plan, the fighting was going on
The
as that
fighting was going
was
on, so there's
negotiated.
everyone has always understood that there's the two are separate issues, a ceasefire and peace talks. But they want to confuse people because most people are not really that sophisticated about it. Well, look, Putin is being unreasonable. He's not agreeing to a ceasefire, so that means he's against peace. And they're doing this. This is very, very dishonest. Oh, well, look, we're interested in a ceasefire, an unconditional ceasefire. Well, what can be more reasonable than an unconditional ceasefire? And so here's the meaningful peace talks. And
Of course, we're supposed to rely upon the author to tell us what is meaningful.
that's right. And of course, as we quoted earlier with Lavrov, he says we haven't changed our position. It's the Americans who changed their position. He says they changed their position from what they said in Anchorage. And Trump did that. Trump did that on Friday when he sent out that truth after the meeting, the acrimonious, or not a particularly successful meeting with Zelensky. He sent out this truth again, going back to the ceasefire plan. And I think that's why I think the Russians felt disappointed because I thought we've gone beyond that. You agreed a ceasefire doesn't really address the problem. Leaders are expected to use the meeting to focus the world's attention on how they can further strengthen Ukraine's hand and cripple Russia's ability to continue to wage war. And then Prime Minister Keir Starmer said, the only person involved in this conflict who does not want to stop the war is President Putin. And his depraved strikes on young children in the nursery this week make that crystal clear.
Wow, they just keep pushing it here.
They
It's
can,
really interesting. Look at that sentence. Leaders are expected to use the meeting to focus the world's attention on how they can further strengthen Ukraine's hand and cripple Russia's ability to continue the war. Well, maybe you're having this meeting because Ukraine's ability to continue this war is being crippled.
well,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, also, this is we're seeing acts of desperation stealing Russia's central bank assets, um, um, kissing up to Trump in the most disgusting way possible. I mean, they see the writing on the wall. Things are not good, okay? And they want to consolidate. And this is why they're doing this here. I mean, they're not doing this from a position of strength.
Well,
Not at all.
they want to continue this war. I mean, their policy hasn't changed. I mean, they say, how can we continue this war? Um, and they were feeling when Trump came into office that their war plans might go awry. And suddenly they came, they thought, hey, let's have a ceasefire. What a great idea. And then they saw that Russia obviously wasn't going to accept that, and so they're pretending that somehow they're interested in bringing this to an end. This is a total dishonesty. But this is something that they're using to fool the public and to fool Trump. Oh,
Yes.
well, we're with you. We're being reasonable here. We want to bring this thing to an end.
Could you, what publication is this?
This is a press release from
Oh, that's right.
from Downing Street.
Just as a kind of a thought puzzle, everyone, let me reread and alter the sentence. The only person involved in this conflict who does not want to stop the war is Benjamin Netanyahu, and his deprived strikes on young children in a nursery this week made that crystal clear. Could you ever imagine the British government?
They would never do that. And then it said, and time and again, we offer Putin the chance to end his needless invasion, to stop the killing and recall his troops. But he repeatedly rejects those proposals and any chance of peace. It's very strange. He kind of rejects the proposal that he capitulate and admit defeat. That is so unreasonable. I mean, just
I wonder.
Please capitulate and admit defeat.
Because there is a tip jar for this podcast, I'd like to point out to everyone. And if the tip jar is more generously replenished or even contributed to at all, it would be a very interesting process, though it would take time and effort. But what did the British government have to say about the negotiations going on in Istanbul weeks after the start of the conflict? What did they say? What did they say?
Yeah.
Because, I can tell you that the approach that the Russians have been taking, and I think it would have been brought to Budapest that if that had come to fruition, is a draft, a reasonable facsimile of what was negotiated
Right.
at the start of this conflict. The Russians are still, that's how they see this, as a blueprint.
Yep.
You wouldn't know that from the British government today,
you
would you?
know, yeah. And one has to assume, in light of what Lavrov and in light of what Putin said, that this is what they pointed out to Trump in Anchorage, and during that 2.5 hour conversation is very long. I mean, what do they talk about? I assume this is what they talked about, that this is the framework for bringing this to an end. You have to have a framework. Just simply calling a ceasefire isn't going to do it. And that's why they thought, okay, Trump seems to accept our position. And then, boom, he didn't. He went back, what about, an immediate ceasefire? And so that's exactly that, and part of that framework obviously is the issue of the security guarantees. And therefore how that has to be formulated, because remember, this is, and we've said this many times before, Istanbul was very, very detailed on the security guarantees issue. So there was a great deal about that, how the security guarantees would work. It wouldn't be NATO security guarantees for Ukraine. That wasn't the start. Security guarantees involved a number of guarantors.
And including Russia.
Including Russia. So in other words, it was a multilateral approach to the project. Now, the number of powers are going to be involved. And I may well be that Putin pointed out, hey, you understood this with this Gaza deal. You brought in other powers. It's not going to be a bilateral thing between Netanyahu and the Palestinians. There are a number of powers that you've brought in to act as guarantors of this deal. And so that's exactly what we had in mind for Ukraine. And maybe Putin thought, okay, well, he seems to understand. But
you have to, everybody, we have to wonder if Keith Kellogg has a room at the White House.
Yeah, Keith Kellogg.
I mean, it's been said very many times, and I'm exasperated by all of this, to be quite honest. Is it really true the last person that talks to Trump has his ear? It looks like it.
I don't know. It's very strange. I mean, if that is the case, then you feel, well, why are you president then? I mean, why did you want to be president?
Look, everyone, I
If
mean,
you're
this is
persuaded
an
by the last
admission.
person that you spoke to.
This is an admission of failing, at least on my part. Maybe George will agree. I mean, we scoffed and ridiculed Marco Rubio. Where's Marco? Where's Marco? Where's Marco? Well, he's arrived, it looks like.
I think so.
Marco is not a free agent, okay? He is the figurehead of very powerful forces,
Yep.
and they
Hmm.
have been curating him
Yep.
all through his political career.
Yep.
He's not going to say no to these people.
No, no, no,
No
no, no.
way.
I mean, exactly. And the moment Trump appointed him, you, we and
Alarm
many
bells went
people
off.
we thought you're essentially you're bringing back Mike Pompeo. I thought
Yep,
turned
yep.
over a leaf, and
Just
lo and
shorter,
behold, Pompeo's back.
just shorter and
Exactly,
thinner.
just shorter, and a little bit better looking than Pompeo.
I
But
don't know who his tailor is, but he's got some nice suits, I
he
have
does
to say.
have a nice suit. That's the striking thing about him. He's always very nicely turned out.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and um, and in a way, most U.S. secretaries of state have been very nicely turned out. I mean, Pompeo was a kind of an exception because in those days he was very, very overweight, which is unusual. It's about that secretaries of state. But yeah, Rubio is very
Well,
much in that.
look, think of, like James Baker. I mean,
Exactly,
very,
always
very,
spick and
very
span.
patrician.
That's right. Absolutely. You can see his suits always immaculately pressed, the pocket square, everything, not one speck of dust on on the shoulder, his shoulder. That's the way U.S. Secretary of State, William Rogers, you remember the way he
Oh,
looked,
so
yeah.
Cyrus Vance cut a good
Cyrus
jib.
Vance, that's the way you look. And Rubio is very much. Look at the way he ties so straight. It's just you're
Is
beautiful.
that a Windsor? Is that a Windsor tie?
Could be. Yeah.
Not? I think it's a Windsor.
Yeah, it could well be, but looks very very nice. It's he's obviously taken a lot of trouble over that.
And Marco, for what it's worth, you got a good photographer tailing around you all the time. There's some good shots of him.
Very much so, exactly. And then and anyway, it goes on from the about Putin.
Yeah.
Nothing at all particularly interesting here. Um,
After all,
That's right. Yeah, that's right. In the past fortnight, the international community has stepped up its decisive action to force President Putin back to the negotiating table. And,
but it's Trump that canceled it. Come on.
that's right. Exactly. But it's also so outrageous that the British, who did the most to sabotage a possible agreement that could have ended the war in the spring of 2022. The British talking about the negotiating table. They negotiate. There was a deal that was almost signed. It had already been initialed, and Boris Johnson came and destroyed.
Flip the table. Flip the table.
That's right. Well, to force President Putin back to the back. It says back to the negotiating table. He was at the negotiating table. What do you mean back? Oh, we're forcing him. Anyway, and anyway, so they talk about but you see, this is what you were saying earlier. What Trump did has now really given a boost to these creatures because now look at how triumphant they are. They're exulting in the U.S. decisive action this week to place a chokehold around Putin's finance flows and sanction two of the largest Russian oil companies.
Again, is the UK at war with Russia? This is very, very
Well,
warlike.
that's a very good question because when you listen to these people, it does sound as if you're at war. Anyway, this is going to be the today's meeting. We had the 19th sanctions, and then look who's showing up. So Zelensky is going to be there. And then Mette Frederiksen, one of the dumbest leaders, and that's
Dumb as a doorknob.
dumb as a doorknob. That she's the Dane, and then Prime Minister Dick Schoof
What country is he from?
from I think he's from the Netherlands. He's the Netherlands guy. So we got the Dane, we got the Dutchman, then we've got Mark Rutte, who was his predecessor as Dutch Prime Minister. Are all expected to attend the meeting in person at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. They will be greeted by children from the St. Mary's Ukrainian School, which has welcomed hundreds of them. And then a further 20 leaders are expected to dial in. Oh, 20 leaders. Sorry, I mean, it's Friday afternoon. I have plans for the weekend. I mean,
Anyway, we're planning this war to go on for another 3 years.
yeah,
What's the
exactly.
rush?
What's the rush? I mean, look, you got Macron. He has plans. Not going to go to London on a Friday afternoon.
No, I don't think Maloney is going to. No way.
No, it doesn't. Look, I mean, that's the best you can do. A Dane,
I
a
mean,
Dutchman.
it's pretty overcast in the UK now, isn't it?
It's overcast. It's cold. It's depressing. I mean,
Yeah, but that's always been the strongest memories I have of the UK. It's all negative things,
yeah,
okay?
yeah. Yes.
And God, English food is like prison food.
Yeah, I doubt whether I doubt whether the Foreign Office, the catering at the Foreign Office is a particularly high level. I mean, they could bring something in from some French restaurant, but I doubt it. I think it's probably going to be sandwiches provided by the Foreign Office, and they probably, if you're, Macron or Maloney, you're used to eating much better than this. You think, I don't. This is what I'm going to do on a Friday afternoon. I mean, there's some much more interesting things to be done.
Anyway, I've met Zelensky like 30,000 times.
Yes, exactly. And
And to be honest, guys, this is like the Discord conversation, and like, what are we possibly new can we say?
exactly. That's right. I mean, it's like so
What possibly new?
exactly. So they
No,
got
because Starmer, he's in the gutter, everyone. And this is his mantle. This is his mantle policy that he's trying to starve off oblivion because once he leaves, the next day, no one's going to remember
no,
this guy.
no. It's just like trying to remember who was this predecessor. Who's the guy who was his predecessor? You think
That Indian guy.
the Indian guy, exactly, the Indian hedge fund guy. You're always trying to remember. Yeah, and most people say, oh yeah, it was the woman with the cabbage woman. Oh,
Yeah,
Liz
well,
Truss, yeah.
because of the cabbage, I remember
That's
Liz.
right. Liz Truss, exactly.
Who would have thought what was her name? Oh my God, this is awful. What was her name?
The Theresa May.
Yeah, Theresa May. Who would
Yeah.
have thought she's the intellectual of the group?
Right, but the only reason I
I can't
remember,
believe that just proves my point.
right, the only
I
reason
couldn't remember her name.
yeah, I only remember Theresa May because she did that horrible dance. You remember
I just as you were saying it, I remember those stick arms of her.
that's right, it did that.
And I've always been, look, I don't cut a good jib when I dance because I never dance, okay? I don't even do a jingle. So I give her a pass on that. But I don't give her a pass by doing it. I mean, if you do it badly, I understand, but you know you're going to do it badly, so don't do it.
Don't do it. Exactly. Absolutely. Don't do it. And generally, it's not a good look. I mean, anyone middle-aged and elderly doing a dance, it's
Well,
just
she's
not a
got
good
very
look.
sticky.
Yeah, yeah. Generally, leave dancing.
Leave that alone. Don't do it.
Young athletic people. It looks good when they do it. If you're not young and athletic, just don't do it. I mean, unless you do it like Trump, which is almost like it's so laughable and so ridiculous.
Yeah,
Actually, it's
because
quite entertaining.
well, no, because that's how most Americans of his size and stature and age dance. So we forgive him for that, okay?
Right.
But as George and I have said 100,000 times, Donald Trump occupies a very special
Right.
category, and I don't even know how to describe it, but it's
Right.
just different.
It's different. It's different, and it just caught on. I mean, the way he danced. I mean, everyone just sort of does that, because it's just they just imitate him because it's just so ridiculous. So that little dance he does with the YMCA dance. So it's caught on, but it's caught on in a positive way. In the case of Theresa May, it caught on in a very negative way. And there's nobody liked what
Well,
she.
as Max Weber taught us, that, you can't transfer
No,
charisma.
no,
Okay.
no, no.
I mean, you're charismatic or you're not.
You're
I,
correct.
I can't say, now I bestow my charisma on you. It
That's
doesn't work that way. It
absolutely.
never works that way.
No, absolutely. Anyway, so this meeting presided over by Keir Starmer. Imagine, Keir Starmer, one of these very dismal, dour kind of Englishmen. Who would want to spend? Let me think. I want to spend a few hours in the company of Keir Starmer. Uh, I don't think it's anyone's weekend plans.
What? So you're going to have like 20 boxes?
Yes.
Who's talking? Who, uh, that's what it's going to be.
Well,
And I'm sure Macron's going to say, "Can we, is this going to, let's just do bullet points. Let's do bullet points here. My spouse is threatening me again." Okay.
I'm assuming they have 20 boxes, so I'm assuming that they're not all going to be, listening intently to what is being said. So at various points, they're going to just put a blank screen while they're doing whatever they're
Well,
doing.
somebody's definitely going to be eating.
Exactly. So,
No,
blank screen.
it'll be like me. So Summer is talking, and then somebody's going to do.
Exactly. Exactly. And then somebody would just leave a microphone on, and then you hear crunching sound. Just crunch.
I wonder if anyone's going to. I'm sitting in for the French president. Okay.
Yes.
I wonder how many there'll be substitutions.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I think it's going to be a lot of substitutions because, they just don't want to do it, and particularly as you've said, they've heard all this a million times
Yeah, can you
before.
imagine the Estonian? The Estonian. I work for the Estonian Foreign Ministry. Oh, okay, good. Welcome to the meeting. Can we make this quick because I'm the one that's supposed to turn off the lights. Okay.
Exactly.
We value our we because it's getting dark
Yes.
early.
Yeah.
I know that it's getting darker every
That's right.
single day.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder how many substitutions will be there.
Yeah. I'm sure. But you also have to wonder, all these trips. They make all these trips. I mean, somebody pays for them. I mean,
Think about the carbon footprint.
the carbon footprint. And then what about taxpayers? Taxpayers think about, well, how much are we actually spending on all these trips? And why do we need these trips? I mean, precisely because, I mean, if you can phone it in, why does anyone have to fly on a
Maybe they
plane?
don't understand the technology of a skiff,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
encryption.
Anyway,
I mean, I'm surprised, I'll reverse that. Maybe Macron, is begging for a way to get away. He's under lock and key right now. He can't.
right. It didn't sound as if Macron is coming. That didn't sound like he was planning on a trip to see his good
Could you
friend Keir.
could you
So Keir.
imagine? Could you imagine, Orban trying to join? Okay.
Yeah, I guess yes.
I love his. I don't. I mean, you probably see him on the news and stuff like that far more than I do, obviously. But he's like, since we're talking about the UK, he's very much like a bulldog. He can
Yeah,
just
yes.
like sit there and stare at you.
Right. That's right. Well, he has that build, kind of a quite short, squat kind of guy. But they just don't like hearing what he has to say because he's going to say what he always says: Hungary is for peace. That's we don't want war. We don't. That's what it's going to. And they don't want to hear that. But that's his repeated.
Well, I
Say,
think
no,
that
we want peace.
if he got on the call, he's going to say, "I had already ordered the catering, and now somebody's got to have to pay for that. Somebody's got to have to pay for it. Where do I send it?
That's
Okay,
right. That's right.
yeah, I'll send the invoice. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, that's going to be you know, a very uninteresting event. After the EU meeting, now we have a coalition of the willing, and doubtless Starmer will make his duly unannounced. Well, we've come to these all sorts
Well, I
of
mean,
agreements on all the things that we're going to do to help Ukraine.
why are they doing this? Because it's obviously senseless, okay? A waste of time, waste of money. But there is a good reason why they're doing this. They want to keep the momentum. They want to keep the headlines. They want to keep Trump on board.
That's the
This is
key.
the Trump 12-point. See, that's what they're going to do. So they're
Right,
going to, by the end of this day, they're going to put it out, what
right,
the meeting was like. Then
right.
they're going to have the weekend, the
Yep.
commentary on all of it. And then mark my words, everyone, they have an event for Monday,
Right. No,
okay?
and that's
To
right.
keep the momentum,
Yep.
keep the momentum,
Yep.
okay?
And I think this 12-point plan, they're going to foist this on Trump and they say, you're such a genius. You brought peace to the Middle East after 3,000 years. Um,
What was it? Clemenceau had. I think it was Clemenceau, and when Woodrow Wilson announced his 14 points, and I think it was Clemenceau. He said, "For God's sake, Moses only had 10."
That's right. That's right. That's right. So here's, as you know, you have the 20-point plan for Gaza. How about a 12-point plan for Ukraine? And I think they're going to try and get him. This is, and you're going to be the chairman of the board. Look at you. Chairman of the board. Even so, that's going to be two boards that you're chairman of. And so I think they're going to voice this on. I suspect Trump is going to just parry that one. I don't think he's going to buy into that. But without question, they're going to try and voice this on him because they know that's what gives credibility to their plans. Because once Trump somehow distanced himself, then they're suddenly all over the place. Which is what they were, earlier this year, because I think they were panicking about what Trump was going to do. But now that he's on board, that kind of, now they feel they have some credibility, some solidity. So that's why this is always their task: keep Trump on board.
Well, it will be interesting to see what Rubio and his people have to say over the weekend about this, okay?
Yeah,
Because this is a major, like I said, they want, because it's the end of the work week, these
right.
people, you know, they everybody likes their weekend, okay? They want to keep the momentum up, okay? We'll see if Rubio is on board for this, okay? I will be watching that very closely to
Right,
keep the momentum going,
right,
okay?
right, right. Yeah.
Because um, they have to. Well, how is it when how to negotiate with your boss when you have a good idea? You have to convince your boss that it's his
Right,
idea.
right. Yeah, no, I think that's right. Um, but on the other hand, Trump is quite shrewd, and I think he will know that this is, they voiced this 12-point plan on him, and he says this is not going to fly. I mean, I do think he's going to feel
I
that
don't know,
this,
George. See,
there's no
that's
way there's no way this is going to go anywhere, and I think that's why he
Oh,
will.
I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but I mean,
I mean, the
if
20-point plan, at least there is a ceasefire. We'll see how that
well,
develops, but at
that's
least,
a
yeah, but this,
podcast for another
all
time.
right, that'll be
Okay.
nice. But I think this, he'll look at this and says, I mean, he's listened enough to Putin to know that this is a non-starter. And why would I want to have my name associated with that? That
But
doesn't
we,
won't come up with at
I
some
don't know. See,
plan, but I
that's
don't
where
think
we,
you want to associate yourself with this one.
where this is where we are. I don't know how to approach this right now because, to be really honest with you, this has been exhausting.
Yeah.
I mean, this week alone. So I sometimes I think, you and I discussed it. I guess it was last summer. Will Trump throw in the towel? He may be throwing in the towel in a different way. I mean, he'll just say, "Well, these people are working for me." Okay, the Europeans will work on a plan. Okay, because you could tell when Rudy Fruity was there, you could see he's like tired of this.
Yeah,
He's exhausted by it. Okay, he wants to think about the ballroom,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm sure
No, I think,
he
yeah.
probably goes 2 or 3 times a day to see what's going
Right. No,
on.
I'm sure that is right. But I think because he hasn't really applied any real thought to this. He's kind of being just dragged along and in one way and another way because he has no idea. He has absolutely no idea. Yeah, he wants to bring the war to an end, but he has no idea of what kind of a goals would you accept? What kind of a final settlement would you think is a reasonable one? He
Okay,
hasn't thought about that. And
but
that's
let's
why I just, well, I'll apply pressure here, I'll apply pressure there, and somehow
or
maybe at some point everything's going to work out.
or maybe we should approach it from a different angle, is that it will be it will be presented to him as a win. This is a win, and it'll be your see that will keep his attention.
But what's the win? Where's the win?
George and I are purely speculating right now because if you look at it in a very, very sober way, I mean, he could change his mind on Monday.
Well, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think he could, but
he
I think
could.
as we discussed, and I think it's very likely that that he's going to put in he's going to put in a phone call to Putin. It's sometime really within the next week. I think he's going to put in another phone call to say, yeah, well, look, we can still meet and we can still discuss things and so on. But it's not going to get him very far. I mean, I just don't. I think the
Yeah,
Russians,
but I think
Russians will say, and talk about what? What do you want to talk?
okay. Given again, George does the work. Everybody, he prepared far more slides than I see pretty well again. Okay, I saw the number. I looked there on the bottom real quick because he doesn't want me to see. I know that. Okay, and he quickly go to the first slide because you know what? And you see how I'm 36. Okay, but that's work. That's a lot of work. Okay, so it should be duly compensated. All right. Now, because I got all wound up about that, I forgot what I was going to say.
Right. Well, well, I think we're gonna. I mean, we need to just kind of wind this up now. I think we're gonna be closely observing
Oh, I know what I
developments
wanted to
over the
say.
next few days.
I don't think I think we have to strongly consider that if Putin wants to, I'm sorry, Trump wants to propose another meeting, I'm not sure the Russians are going to go for it.
I don't think so either.
think it's
I don't think so
hey.
either. I think unless Trump really has something very specific in mind. He's got some very specific ideas, but this thing in Budapest, I think the Russians would be very pissed off by this. Having sort of built this up, this is a big thing, and then just simply changing your mind, and abandoning it without any real explanation. Then they don't appreciate it. Nobody would appreciate that. They say,
George,
we don't want to go down this path again.
I'm not in one way I'm not disappointed. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of relieved. I never liked the idea of meeting in Budapest, just for the security reasons. Okay, I just don't trust these people in Washington, in Brussels. I don't trust them.
Right.
Okay. Oh, it was an accident, Oh.
Right. Well, no, I think so. I think yeah. I mean, for sure, there were real genuine security concerns. I mean, to get to Budapest, he flies over Turkey, and then I don't know how they would do it, Bulgaria, Montenegro, whatever. So that's NATO. That's NATO territory. Before he gets to Serbia, I think he's safe in Serbia, safe in Hungary, but nonetheless, the plane would have to traverse NATO territory.
Well, remember MH17?
Yeah.
Who did it?
Yeah.
Who did it? I don't know. Same thing, Oh, a rogue rocket. Where did it come from?
Yeah. No.
Oh, or they shot his own plane down. Oh, that would be the first. Oh, they killed him.
Yeah. No, it's a real concern. I agree. I mean, it's unlikely, but it is a real concern.
Well, if there's 1% chance of it, then cancel it. No way.
Right. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Again, I really want to stress everyone, this is all spontaneous. George and I, maybe 2 or 3 minutes before we talk about this, and this, but we don't have our own talking points or anything like that. This is very off the cuff. Okay. And I find that that's what makes it really valuable. Okay. And we can change our minds. We can all kinds of things. That's what I hope this is for a lot of people, is kind of a pedagogical experience of trying to, look at different angles, consider different points, look a little bit further back, look for precedents and things like that. That's why I do it. Okay. Because it helps me refine my ideas about what's going on. Okay. And I hope George feels the same
Yeah, no,
way.
I absolutely, yeah. That's how I think of it, and I think it's fun, and I think it's it's educational, and I think that it's educational for everyone, and I think it's really worth doing, and we're creating a historical record. So
Right.
when the history of this time will be written, I think the gaggle will play a role, will be an important source of information about what happened during these years.
Right. And on that note, this is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. This will be the third time I'm mentioning the tip jar, okay?
Yeah,
Because I have to,
yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Unfortunately, okay? Now, I love that phrase. This podcast doesn't do it itself,
That's right,
okay?
exactly. Yeah,
It's not a self-looking, licking
exactly.
ice cream
The
cone.
podcast doesn't broadcast itself. This is the point Buddy's always making. Yeah, it doesn't broadcast itself. That tip jar needs to be moving, in the right direction. That's exactly, always be closing, always be filling up. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology, and above all, Buddy will calm down one of these days. Unlikely, but stranger things have happened. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.